Good evening, my friends. This is the Grim Tutor, aka the #1 old-bordered magic card respecter on planet Earth, and I am here to teach you a lesson. I am here to grade the Time Spiral Remastered old border time shifting process for each and every card as they come out. So we're going to do the first batch tonight. We've got a grading scale, the good old-fashioned American public school grading scale. A is for objectively superior cards that you simply must transition to old border if you have new ones in your current deck, and F is for ones that frankly, they just should have stayed with the new border. They should never have been time shifted in the first place. Everything else, of course, running the gamut in between. Room for some moderation here too, of course. So, obviously, this is subjective. Obviously, this is just for fun. Or is it? Or is it the most important Magic the Gathering video you have ever watched? You decide, my friends, but thank you, as always, for watching. Thanks to all Patreon supporters. Let's get into it. And we're going to kick things off, my friends, by talking about the 3 cards that were spoiled a handful of months ago, actually, but they're 3 really cool ones. The first one is Path to Exile. Now, I'm going to give Path to Exile a B+ grade. The old border here is very, very nice looking. I am partial to the white old border. We're going to actually see a lot of white cards tonight, and that is definitely something we'll get into, of course, a little bit later. But if you look at the new old-fashioned way, right, the new old border, the time-shifted printing, that's how we'll refer to these Time Spiral Remastered ones henceforth. They are definitely getting a lot of mileage out of that old border. If you look at the overall feel, the kind of softness, the ancient glow that it gives to the card, definitely in keeping with the theme of Path to Exile and with the ubiquity of the card. It is a relatively new addition to Modern Spool, of course, compared to something like Swords to Plowshares, right? But the card still feels old. It still feels like it is timeless, in a way. At least from the perspective of a mostly modern player like myself. So, again, I'm giving it a B+, and if the only alternative was this Conflux printing that you see with the same art, I would even give it an A- or perhaps even a solid A. But there are a ton of other printings for Path to Exile, so while it is amazing to have this time-shifted old-bordered option, it is not even to the #1 old-bordered respecter on planet Earth. Not even necessarily the clear winner. Let's look at the other paths. This is a pretty cool one. I think this one is underrated. It's from a dual deck. Definitely pretty sweet there. We also have this F&M promo, which it's very quaint, and I mean that in a good way. I do respect this choice for Path, although it's not my favorite. It is a pretty cool one. A different take, right, on the theme here. We have the one from the Gideon signature spellbook, which, it kind of sucks, honestly, not gonna lie, and Gideon's dead, so whatever. No thank you. And we have this absolutely spectacular, glorious Magic Fest printing, full art, just really ambitious and well executed. Big fan of this, if you couldn't tell. And before, this was my clear personal favorite, this beautiful DCI promo from Rebecca Guay, and now the Magic Fest one definitely runs it close. I think using either of these is absolutely incredible, but of course using the time-shifted one, very, very cool too. So the time-shifted Path to Exile, a very great choice for it, only falling shy of true top tier because there are already so many other paths to choose from, and so many of them are beauteous. And next we have Relentless Rats, which is a noteworthy printing, unlike Path to Exile and also unlike Chalice of the Void, which we'll cover next, which were the first 3 they released. It is noteworthy not because of its power across multiple formats. It is noteworthy because of this line of text. A deck can have any number of cards named Relentless Rats. Let's go. Very, very exciting stuff. But we also have to rate the time-shifting process here, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a B-, right? Only a B-. I think it's a good idea, right? Because of the fact that you can have a Relentless Rats only deck. I think that makes it a good candidate. On the other hand, to me, even though I'm a sucker for the old border, especially black cards in the old border style, the retro style as I believe they're calling it, to me, the overall feel is very samey, right? And maybe I'm just not as excited about our Relentless Rats deck as I should be. But to me, the overall vibe has not changed all of that much. And the art for me is about a medium. And we also have had a couple of other Relentless Rats to choose from. This one is the same, but it is a promo. And it's called Rati Spietati. Sorry for the non-existent Italian accent, but Creatura Ratto, right? Like, that's just so cool. Why aren't you playing Rati Spietati in your Relentless Rats jank, I ask you, right? If you're going to do something cool, you already have this option. And then we've got another. The Masters 25 brought a more a more plague-ridden Relentless Rats in like a Golgari vibe, kind of Undercity, almost Warhammer Skaven type of way, whereas there's more of an old-fashioned Magic the Gathering vibe, that I'm getting from the original art of Relentless Rats. So overall, cool to have this as an option. Again, I like the idea in terms of how I actually feel about it. We're going with a B-. And next, as promised, we are covering Chalice of the Void, and Chalice now comes in brown bordered style, and this is completely incredible. I am going to give it an A-. Sorely tempted to give it a solid A. I will go into the reasons for that, of course, but the first thing I want to point out is that the brown border is OP. You know, part of me likes the silver border, the silver feel, the silver frame, I guess is what I'm trying to say, or the whitish gray frame of the modern artifacts, but the brown bordered artifacts, my friends, those go straight to my heartstrings. Those are what are nostalgic for me. And the other thing that I will say is that Chalice of the Void definitely fits in artifact decks with other brown-bordered artifacts. You know, you think about cards like Tormod's Crypt, Ensnaring Bridge. These come in brown borders too. And one thing I do like is for my artifacts to match. I don't mind using all of the new style of artifacts if that's what we have, but all else being equal, I'm opting for the brown ones. The other thing that I'll say about this Mark Zug art that is copied from the original printing from Mirrodin into this time-shifted version is that I actually notice and appreciate the art more due to the brown frame. I never really minded it. I never said, ooh, that art's not for me, but only upon seeing it in the brown frame do I realize, wow, this is actually a pretty cool piece. So yeah, it's an A-. The reason it is not an A is because there are some solid competitors. There is a masterpiece, of course, which is very, very stylish. No matter what you think about them, they're definitely really cool. I think that doesn't really follow, right? No matter what you think about them, they're definitely really cool. Okay, way to put thoughts in everybody else's mind, right? But the point I'm trying to make here is that I think most people, even if they don't personally prefer masterpieces or personally choose to use them, most people say, yeah, these are a good idea, these are mostly well executed. Unlike something like the Amonkhet Invocations, for example, that really split opinion. So yeah, a cool masterpiece, and one that definitely very much deviates from the original one, which is good. It's good to have a different representation here of this very iconic card, but then we also have got that Seb McKinnon Judge promo, which is just absolutely next level. Again, a pretty different vibe, one that calls more closely back to the original Mark Zug art, but this one, of course, has Seb's unique style written all over it. So there are some very, very cool options here for Chalice of the Void, which is the only reason we fall short of an A or even an A+ here. But I'm not really a Chalice player myself, but this card has me hyped. Very, very cool stuff. And next up is Lotus Bloom, and is this a too soon moment? Is this untimely? Because yes, of course, Ad Nauseam has been crippled, if not outright killed, by the banning of the 8-man. F in the comments, as always, for our beloved Simian Spirit Guide, the Ape Defense Squad. Don't worry, is drafting plans for his release as we speak. They will be hearing from us, but until then, we have to evaluate Lotus Bloom not on its modern merits for gameplay, but on the art, and man, oh man, this brown border really suits the Christopher Rush promo Lotus Bloom to a T. I'm going to go ahead, my friends, and give this one an A, because the Lotus Bloom alternatives are the same exact art, in a silver frame, and I do favor the brown frame in general, and specifically with this piece, I think it really makes Christopher Rush's understated style and nostalgic style stand out a great deal. He is one of the most iconic artists of early Magic for me. Right? So big fan of this, and its only competition is actually another Mark Zug piece. So Mark Zug doing very well with these zero cost or really high ceiling artifacts, right? And the Mark Zug piece is really cool. And in fact, in some ways, I prefer it to Christopher Rush's, but at the same time, I don't need it over the other art. You know what I mean? It's not like, well, I like the frame on one, the art on the other. I like the art about the same on both. And I think either art would have really flourished here with the brown border. Therefore, I give the new time-shifted printing of Lotus Bloom an A. Next, we're looking at cranial plating. And if the Lotus Bloom made me mourn the loss of Simian Guide and therefore ad nauseum as we knew it, then cranial plating makes me mourn the long dead and much beloved Affinity deck. F in the comments for our beautiful little robots. They were too pure for this format, but cranial plating, it's still an iconic card. It's still something, back when Affinity was a pillar of the modern format. This was one of the payoffs. This really terrorized many players, and this is a straight up A. There is no alternative art for cranial plating, and this suits the brown border like very few things can. You might look at the original printing with the silvery gray frame and say that this kind of burnished backdrop and like the bone that's coming out, the kind of brass coloration of the actual plating itself, it's not exactly a shiny artifact, is it? You might say that, well, the silvery gray frame makes that stand out, and that's true. It is a nice piece here from Adam Rex. But the brown border, I might, as a non-artist, might think, well, it might all look a little bit washed out with a brown border. Not the case. This just looks really synergistic, for lack of a better term. It looks awesome. Big fan of this. And can we say just how important the text being white here? I mean, this lends a lot to so many things. I think it actually gives a lot of balance to these otherwise potentially washed out printings that you might not otherwise see. Hope I'm not overrating that, and I hope you understand my point. But yeah, straight up A here. All we need now is Mox Opal back, so it can actually see play again. Don't beat me up for that one. You didn't hear anything. That was, I don't know who said that. Somebody took my mic for a minute. Anyway, A for cranial plating, no contest. And next up we have Banishing Light. Now we're getting into the ones that were spoiled today, so we have lower resolution images for the time-shifted ones on the left. I'm trying not to let that color my perception. It definitely doesn't look as spectacular as some of the ones we've just been looking at, so we have to kind of remember how nice those ones looked and apply that here. And Banishing Light, I'll be honest, I've never really paid close attention to the art. It's actually pretty stunning, and just for the sake of completion, we have the original printing here. There's also a promo printing of Banishing Light. I don't know if I've ever seen this, and that's actually a really cool art. I actually like both a fair amount. That said, I think they picked the appropriate art to put into the old border. And as much as I did just make that caveat, looking here, I'm not sure Banishing Light necessarily suits the old border quite as much as some of the other ones we've looked at. So I'm going to give it a solid B. I'm a fan of it, but the alternatives are relatively compelling, so no higher than a B for me. Next is Restoration Angel, and this is a pretty cool candidate in my opinion to time shift. That said, we have a few other options here, and what we're looking at is actually the art from the Avacyn Restored promo, if I'm not mistaken. And I think this is actually, I don't know if it's my favorite art, but I think it's probably the correct art or my favorite art to be a candidate for Time Shifted. If you look at the original Avacyn Restored, just pack printing, the original printing, this might actually be my favorite, right? I like the shape of the wings here, and actually the color and the texture of the wings. I like all of the wings. The hair of the angel is very nice, and overall it's a similar vibe. It is a little bit, though, I would like to see this in the old border to compare with the other one. I think, though, this is my favorite art of the three, And the Avacyn Restored art is actually my favorite candidate for time shifting, right? That said, this remains, I think, my favorite art in a vacuum. We also have this relatively recent from Kaldheim Commander. This is my least favorite of the three. It's cool that it's a different take on it while maintaining some of the same characteristics as the other two, but for me, doesn't really compare. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a B+ with room to wiggle here, once I see it in paper, of course, and also with the notion of, I think this is the best candidate to time shift, but I'm not exactly sure. What if my straight up favorite art was time shifted? Would I like that a little bit better? Hard to say. And then we've got Ajani's Pridemate, and this was from M11, this art from Svetlin Velinov, and I don't know if I absolutely loved the decision to throw this one back in time with the time shifting, because Svetlin's art is great here. It's really good, but something about the proportions of the cats, right? I don't know how to describe it any more clearly or any better than that. Something about the proportion of the cats tells me that this is a postmodern card rather than a pre-modern card in terms of the border style, in terms of when it was commissioned and when it was drawn. So to that end, there is something maybe cool about putting a more modern feeling card into the time-shifted frame, but overall, I don't know if it appeals to me, and I also don't know if this is exactly the type of card that I expected to be time-shifted. It's certainly not as iconic as Chalice of the Void or Path to Exile, but not even as iconic to me as like Lotus Bloom or Restoration Angel, personally. That said, it's still definitely a fine one. I think in some ways the old frame does suit the colors of the scene depicted here, especially the background. It suits it pretty well. And there is another Ajani's Pridemate. This one is interesting, but I don't like it personally as well as the original printing. So for me, this one we're going to go ahead and give it a B-. I could be a little harsh here and put it down to a C+, but I think B- probably about right for me. Next up, we have Silence, and two things about this. Number one, Silence is a card that I actually think might suit the new frame a little bit more than the retro frame. Not sure about that, but I think it might, but this green border has got me all kinds of whacked out. I'm going to be honest, I don't really know what this is all about. Haven't had a chance to read into it. Did a little search and actually don't know exactly what that's about, so somebody tell me what to think about this one. The green border, don't know what to make of it, not gonna lie, but Silence is getting the time-shifted treatment and also apparently the green border treatment. Who knew? Who expected? Living in such times, but here we are. Paging the Fjord, because next up, that's right, we've got a time-shifted Lingering Souls. Hype moment. Big hype here. And the art that was chosen to be time-shifted originally appeared on, what is this? Is this a Friday Night Magic promo? It's some kind of promo. But there's also the original art, and this is from Dark Ascension. I personally have always used the original art in paper and online. As far as I remember, I've really preferred the original art. Now, does the old one suit being time-shifted more? I would like to say that in some ways it actually does, because this old art really feels like a callback to some of the more leaving you with a vague impression, slightly more abstract and very much surreal and haunting and yeah. I mean, I almost said the word Lovecraftian. I don't think that's correct here, but kind of an old school horror feel of the type that does tend to push the boundaries a little bit here. And Lingering Souls is definitely a card that could and should evoke that type of feeling, especially if we're looking to harken back to earlier eras of Magic. That said, in a vacuum, leaving those concerns aside, I do think I prefer the original art of Lingering Souls, and I think this would be a banger in the old time-shifted frame as well. So I love the decision to do this. I am understanding of, but very slightly skeptical of the art that they chose to do it in. I think there are some cases for it. I think there's also maybe a slightly greater case to simply use the original art as well. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude that this is an A-. We got an A- for Fjord Staple Lingering Souls. Next up, we have Sram Senior Edificer, and personally, this is something I would never ever earmark as a time-shifted candidate, and that's because I don't really like Kaladesh, and I don't really like Ether Revolt, the latter of which Sram hails from, but you know what? It is amazing what the Old Border can do. All of a sudden, looking at this card again in a lower quality here, it'll look even better once we get a nice resolution image to pour over, but even just with this slightly blurry rendition, this does a world of difference for me, for my perspective, bringing us back in time to the Old Border, to the time-shifted way, suddenly makes all of these, like, warm colors and kind of unfamiliar aesthetics, the kind of pseudo-steampunky stuff, it didn't really hit it out of the park for me, but if it was in the Old Border, honestly, maybe it would have. So even though this is not a card I'll ever really play, and it's not from one of the sets that I especially enjoy, I'm going to give this one an A. I'm going to give this one an A because remember, we're comparing it to the existing options that already are out there. So in a vacuum, of course, I don't like the time-shifted Sram as much as I like some of the other ones I've been raving about. But relative to what's out there, yeah, this is an upgrade. It's a straight-up A. Intangible Virtue is another A for me. At first I wasn't sure, because I actually like the new frame on this card. I think it's a pretty card. I love Innistrad. I'm favorably disposed toward it, right? But the more I looked at it, despite the low resolution, the more I loved the Old Border, what it does for this. I think a lot of things about this piece is from Clint Kearley, especially this light that's coming from the center of it, really do a lot in the new style of card frame, but in the old frame, they do as well, and specifically what really grows in stature for me is the snowfall, kind of the things around the outside of the card art and, the tops of the snow-covered trees at the bottom. It all just looks so much more compelling to me. A little cozy. I don't know if cozy is the right word, but it feels a little bit cozy to me in the old frame. So yeah, this is the only art that's out there, and that's in the old frame. I think it suits it. I like both, but I'm going to give this one an A. And the third A running, my friends, what can I say? Thraben Inspector looking good in that old frame, and I like the new one okay. But to me, I always thought, this card's pretty cool, but it could maybe use some alternative art. Now that I see it in the old time-shifted frame, I don't think we need alternative art. I think this is pretty much awesome as is. It's hard to explain, right? But, for example, if I look at this icon on her shoulder, that is something that is more appealing to me, simply because it is contained within the old frame. Does anyone else share this feel? Either way, I'm giving her an A. Next up is Containment Priest, which I think is a fabulous candidate for time shifting. Now, that said, I think I settle with more of a B+ or A- for her here. Now, partially this might be because the low resolution I think hurts this card a little bit more than others, because with John Stanko, one of the things that really is lost when the image is a little bit more blurry is the shading on the priest's face and even some of the background subtleties here, which overall add to the softness of the card, and it's kind of like a soft power that is projected by the Containment Priest, and with the old border, that could be enhanced. So maybe this one, again, suffers a little bit more from it being blurry, but I'm still comfortable with the B+, A- rating, because I think the new frame helps to also provide a contrast to those things that I just mentioned, and that could count for something. The other reason I'm giving it a slightly lower rating than the ones that are just a pure upgrade is because we have another couple interesting options. I know a lot of people mentioned not or rather, I know that I mentioned a lot of people not necessarily loving the Amonkhet invocations, but to me, this Containment Priest option is definitely one of the coolest ones that I've ever seen. I personally don't usually use the invocations, but this one I could see using, probably more in a commander deck than running it as a multiple X of, in a 60 card deck, but still, I think this is a pretty sweet one. And then you have this full art from M21, this promo from Jesper Essing, and I appreciate how different it is. I appreciate how you have all of these really almost over-the-top strands of magic, of energy, whatever it is around her. These are things that you would mostly associate with a blue and or a red card. So to see this in white, and also to see the background so different from what we're used to seeing in the white colors, this is a unique piece. I wouldn't say it's my favorite. I think even though I like all three, I kind of opt for the original if I have to. But the point is, I think this is a well-covered card already as things stand. So while I'm excited to see her in the old frame, yeah, we're going to settle on about a B+. Last card for tonight, guys, is Flickerwisp, and there is only one Flickerwisp art, and it is beautiful. And it is haunting, it's a little bit disturbing, a little bit of an eldritch vibe, unusually so. For such a white card, it's got 2 white symbols in the cost, and it is mono white, of course. I have always really thought Flickerwisp was a neat card, very interesting, very well designed, and very well rendered in the art from Jeremy Anicio, I would say. Yeah, I hope I'm getting some of these names correct, right? And this is a straight up A. Dare I say it might be our closest yet to an A+, because the only cards I'm really giving A's and A pluses to, if you haven't noticed, are ones with no alternatives or with clearly inferior or very samey alternatives, at least from my perspective, right? So Flickerwisp fits this bill because it is the only Flickerwisp art that does exist. I think the old border is going to make this even better than it already is. I already rate the card's art really, really highly, so best for last, right? Or most upgraded for last again. Some of the other cards may be a little bit flashier, more exciting overall, but in terms of upgrading what options are already on the table for Flickerwisp players, this one's got to be right near the top of the list. But when will it be my turn for an old border? When will we see the time-shifted Grimflayer? You must do this, Wizards of the Coast. I demand it. I require it. It's gotta happen, please. May it be so, and hopefully, in a future video, you'll see me comparing the old and the new Grim side by side. Gotta keep the same art, though. This art is so iconic, so emblematic, right? Definitely can't go wrong, but we need the old border. It's gotta happen. Give us the time-shifted gold cards. It's gonna be sweet. So, I will, if you guys want, cover all 121 of the time-shifted cards, rating them, grading them, as I've done here. If not so much, I'll know that based on how well this is received. And maybe this will be a one-off where I just had fun for once, but don't tempt me, because I'll grade all 121 of these in this format right here for you. We gotta have some fun diversions, right? And on a night like this where I had a really long workday and lots of obligations, I don't really have time to play. But I do have time to spend 45 minutes, half hour or so, however long this took me to make, to crank out some art reviews for you, from somebody who doesn't know the first thing about art. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed it, my friends. Gotta remember why we love this game. It is for fun things like the art, the naming conventions, the flavor, all of the rest. And I think the idea in general of a time-shifted component of a Time Spiral Remastered set is just a pure 10 out of 10 on all of those fronts. So big ups, frankly, to Wizards for doing this. Thank you for watching, and hey, if you want to see more, if you want to see the rest of these cards reviewed by the Flayer, you just let me know. Talk to you soon. Hope everybody out there has a wonderful night.